It was a Monday night in Singapore. For some, it was a good evening to go on a night out, let off some steam, enjoy a few drinks and dance the night away. Why not? The week has just begun, and for some, having to turn up at 9 a.m. for work on a Tuesday was not an issue. However, some let off a little too much steam that evening. In the early hours of the morning on the 2nd of July 2019, a group of young men and one woman in their 20s were stumbling around the Orchard Towers shopping mall after a night out of drinking. It was around 6:15 a.m., and the group of 7 were led by a guy named Tan Sen Yang. In a matter of hours before, Tan Sen Yang had been at the Naughty Girls nightclub with the group, a time which should have been fun and enjoyable for everyone. But things soon took a violent turn, and Tan was highly triggered. He allegedly got into a fight with some individuals in the club, and after he left, things tragically took a turn for the worst. Almost immediately after leaving the club, Tan's anger was fueled by fire, and he decided to slash at a random man in the mall who had been at the club with a foldable karambit knife. He was so full of rage and slashed at the man so viciously that it permanently disfigured the man. Later, a security guard in the mall nearby witnessed the attack and ran to intervene, but got his finger sliced in the conflict. The group of men with Tan now were attempting to leave the mall, in quite a casual manner, I might add. But CCTV shows a 31-year-old man named Satheesh refusing to let the men get away with what they had just done. Satheesh was in the Naughty Girls nightclub whilst Tan and his crew were in there. Satheesh witnessed everything, and he wasn't going to let these guys get away with it. He followed them down the escalators, and you can see on the CCTV that he confronted the group about their actions. There was, at this point, one woman in the group who decided to get involved in the fight as well. You can see from the video that things got heated and violent pretty fast, with a lot of pushing and yelling at the entrance to the mall. The aggression was so apparent, and in a matter of seconds, Satheesh was being punched and slashed at by the group. There were moments of pause in between going for him, but eventually the group backed him into a corner, yelling and pushing and slashing at Satheesh, until he couldn't fight back anymore, and slowly walked and then fell to the ground right outside the entrance to the mall. The men fled, and immediately bystanders rushed to help Satheesh until paramedics arrived. But Satheesh was slashed viciously in the neck, and CCTV shows paramedics desperately trying to resuscitate him as his body goes into failure and bleeds out. Satheesh was tragically pronounced dead at 7:25 a.m. that same morning. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Sinister Obsessions. I am your host, Hannah, and as you can hear, that wasn't a very nice intro that I just gave you today. But we are diving into a quite recent case that happened in Singapore only back in 2019. And this case is still going on today. So, very brief intro for you today, guys. I am just going to continue getting straight into this one because we do have 2 stories to discuss today about the Orchard Towers. This wouldn't be the first time a tragedy like this actually happened in the Orchard Towers. Back in 2002, a brutal double murder actually took place in the car park on the 7th floor of Orchard Towers. So, what is Orchard Towers? It's an 18-story office building in Singapore located on the corner of Claymore Road and Orchard Road. The first 5 floors are a combination of bars and retail outlets, with the remainder leased as offices. During the day, the building functions as a retail and office-style building. But the building is best known as a landmark, entertainment complex famously described as the 4 floors of whores, or simply just the 4 floors. So guys, we're going to rewind back to 2002 to discuss our first story today of what happened in the Orchard Towers. On the 7th of January 2002, a security guard was doing his usual walk around the car park on the 7th floor of the Orchard Towers. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, apart from the fetid, horrendous odour that appeared to be coming from a silver Daewoo Chairman parked in a bay. The guard knew that this wasn't just any bad smell, but the smell of a dead body. There is no mistaking such a distinct smell. He called the police, and when the police arrived, they found the decomposing bodies of a 46-year-old man named Ko Nai Guan and his girlfriend Lan Ya-ming, a 29-year-old. They were both in the car. She was in the boot of the car, and he was in the back seat of the car, abandoned. Mr. Ko's body was stuffed into a wicker chest. His legs were bent out of shape, his face had been battered in, and his corpse was crawling with maggots. Madame Lan was in the boot, dressed only in a spaghetti strap blouse. Her head was wrapped in blue plastic recycling bags which were tied tightly around her neck. Her body was wrapped in blankets and bedsheets and tied with wire. The autopsy showed that both had been strangled to death. The car that they were found in was a 146,000 Singapore dollar car gifted to Mr. Coe by his employer, former financial advisor and British-born Michael McCrea. Just 3 days before the grisly find, the Brit and his Singaporean girlfriend, Secretary Audrey Ong Pei-ling, had already fled to London, and it was more than 3 years later before Michael was back on Singapore soil to face the charges for the murder. But by then, the details of what had happened between him and his victims were already made more than clear. But the deaths were not. Michael initially claimed that a result of a fight had broken out because Mr. Coe had stolen his money to buy drugs. Yes, there had been a fight, but it had started because of a Chinese phrase Mr. Coe had used on Ong. He called her a slut. But Michael and Mr. Coe were close. So close that they and their lovers lived all together in a Pinewood Gardens apartment rented by Michael. Michael, 44 years old, whose pregnant wife was in Australia, clueless to all of this. They were separated though. Michael did have a 22-year-old girlfriend, Ong, who lived with them. Mr. Coe, a father of 3, who was estranged from his wife, lived with Madame Lan, Michael and his girlfriend. She too was married and had twin boys who were with their father in Fujian, China. Mr. Coe was paid handsomely by Michael. He would drive him around for 6,000 Singapore dollars a month, additionally taking him out for business meals and parties. And this is 2002, so that was a lot of money a month compared to the value of it now. He even gave him a bonus 1 month of $20,000 just a month before their falling out. So it all came tumbling down after New Year's Day in 2002, when, after a bit of champagne, Mr. Coe decided to call the boss's girlfriend Jian Hoa. Listeners, please correct me if my pronunciation on that is wrong, but it's supposed to mean slut in Chinese. He also spat at her. It isn't clear what caused him to become so triggered towards Ong, but clearly tensions had been brewing for a while. Michael's reaction was so explosive, he pounced on Mr. Coe, pushing him against the wall and punched him in the face, who then retaliated by breaking a vase on Michael's head. But this had little effect, and Michael proceeded to kick him, fracturing his ribs. Michael actually was a former amateur boxer, and at this point he was only seeing red. He repeatedly punched Mr. Coe in the face and held him in an arm lock so tight that it fractured the small bones in his throat. Madame Lan came at Michael with a knife, but he immediately knocked her unconscious. It was now 4:30 a.m. when Michael and Ong realized that Mr. Coe was dead, when they found his body cold and his legs had turned purple. In desperation and panic, Ong attempted mouth-to-mouth on Mr. Coe, while Michael tried to restart his heart with a massage machine. But, of course, it was too late. Ong then saw Madame Lam move slightly, so dragged her into Mr. Coe's bedroom and put her on his bed. Michael suggested to Ong that they put Mr. Coe's body into a luggage bag, but what was used as a coffee table was a large wicker basket, which they decided would be a better alternative. She emptied the basket and stuffed Mr. Coe's body inside. In sheer panic, Michael and his girlfriend were ready to flee, but he wanted back the $20,000 cash that he had given to Mr. Coe a month prior. Madame Lan, who was now coming around in a daze on Mr. Coe's bed, was pressed for where the money could be hidden. Madame Lan then fell back into an unconscious state. Meanwhile, Michael was still figuring out what to do with the body. They discussed throwing it out to sea. They filled the chest with his belongings and sprayed it with air freshener to try and mask the smell. Through the rest of the next day, Ong popped in and out of the apartment to help run errands. She claimed that Madame Lam was very much alive at this point, but when she returned to the flat later that evening, Madame Lam was lying on the floor and she was going into a fit of convulsions after Michael had kicked her in the head, demanding for the money. Investigations revealed that Michael had placed plastic bags over her head and secured them with ties. When she died, her body was then wrapped in blankets and bedsheets secured with building wire. It's so sad because I do feel like there probably could have been a point where Madame Lan had an opportunity to escape and go straight to the police and tell them everything that happened. Then the bodies were moved quietly in the early hours of the morning to the car park, where they placed the bodies inside the car. They actually drove around to try and find a suitable place to dump the bodies. They drove all the way from Jurong to Tuas, then to the sea off of Punggol, but it was no good as the sun was rising and there were lots of people gathered there. Finally, they ended up on the 7th floor of the Orchard Towers car park, where they decided to abandon the car with the bodies inside and took a taxi back to the apartment. They had planned to dissolve the bodies with acid, but trying to get a hold of acid was merely impossible. Michael decided to deal with the apartment considering there were bloodstains all over the wall and the floor. He bought bleach, rubber gloves, sponge, and paint. The next day, he bought 2 air tickets to London for him and Ong. They later actually flew to Melbourne to stay with Michael's pregnant wife, which apparently she had not spoken to him in a very long time. And he literally just turned up on her doorstep with his girlfriend. And she was like, what the fuck? But it didn't take long for the police to track him down. Actually, the Australian police went to South Melbourne home to attend a domestic dispute, and Michael was detained when they found irregularities in his passport and visa, so he couldn't exactly keep a low profile of himself for very long, could he? Gosh, if you're wanted in Singapore for murder, I would be keeping my head real fucking low. So, he was formally arrested on the 13th of June 2002, when it was discovered that he was wanted in Singapore. Ong had been nabbed a week earlier. It is too long, guys, to go into all the details about the trial and the verdict, especially as our case today also needs to focus on the 2019 Orchard Towers attack. But Ong was sentenced to 12 years of prison after pleading guilty to 2 charges of her helping to dispose of the bodies and removing bloodstains in the apartment. Michael, on the other hand, was still in Australia. As discussed in previous cases, Australian law forbids extradition for anyone to another country where they could receive the death penalty. But eventually he was sent back to Singapore, where he was given 10 years for each person's death, after pleading guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter and of causing evidence to disappear. He was given an additional 4 years for disposing of their bodies. So he would then spend the next 24 years of his life in prison, which, to be honest, I absolutely do not think is enough. So that was the first tragedy which unfolded in the Orchard Towers. But who exactly was our victim in our case today in what happened in the Orchard Towers in 2019? And how did he get so unfortunate that he lost his life just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, trying to do the right thing? Satheesh Noel Godibass was a Singaporean chemist of ethnic Indian descent. Please correct my pronunciation, guys. If that was not correct, I do apologize. Satheesh was born on the 13th of February 1988 and was married with 2 children, a 10-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter at the time that he died. According to his friends, neighbours and family, Satheesh was known to be a kind and helpful person to people around him and was close with his family. A 33-year-old childcare teacher and some of Satheesh's friends remembered him as a loving, caring father who loved his children dearly, and he often found time to fetch his daughter from school. Neighbours who lived in Satheesh's neighbourhood stated that he would help carry heavy bags for them. A former classmate of Satheesh from secondary school described Satheesh as an energetic individual who was a bit naughty, but often a thoughtful person with a good heart. She remembered an incident where she was heavily pregnant at one point, and Satheesh helped her open the door to a grab car and helped to take care of her toddler. Other than that, they often shared friendly verbal exchanges whenever they met each other in the neighbourhood where they resided. Another friend fondly remembered Satheesh in a Facebook post as a good drinking buddy and friend with whom he enjoyed drinking and eating nasi padang together and smoking. He stated Satheesh was forgetful at times before his death. He even left his favourite hat at the bar he frequented at Orchard Towers. The hat was later retrieved and returned to his wife shortly after his death. That just makes me so sad. After the horrific death of Satheesh in the entrance to the shopping mall around 6:15 a.m. after Satheesh was stabbed brutally in the neck, 7 members from the group were caught and arrested the following day and charged. They were Natalie Siwo Yuzhen, age 22, Joel Tan Yun Sheng, age 26, Ang Da Yuan, age 26, Tan Sen Yang, 27, Chan Jia Xing, age 26, Lu Boon Chong, age 25, and Tan Hong Sheng, age 22. Most of the focus was actually on a 22-year-old girl, Natalie, seen in the video as the girl with the grey top and the denim shorts. There is a link, guys, to this video in the episode description. Many netizens seem to think that Natalie was the one who had actually slashed Satheesh. And a lot of people on the internet explained what they thought they saw from the CCTV video. Some say you can see her friend pulling her away behind the pillar, where unfortunately we are not able to see what the actions are. Others express that in the first 12 to 13 seconds, you can see a hand reaching out to the victim's face when he is beside the pillar. And during 12 to 14 seconds, the girl was behind the pillar and got pulled away. She seemed to be the only one who was close enough to the victim and in reach of him. A man in a white shirt was also standing on the left side of the pillar, but he wasn't close enough to reach over to Satheesh, and the rest of the group were behind Natalie. But another source argued that Natalie was seen taking something out of her bag and a few seconds later lunging towards Satheesh. They also summarized that since she was being pulled away by her friends, there is reason to believe that she had the knife with her and was going a little bit too far. However, again, of course, the CCTV footage is quite blurry and a lot happens in a short amount of time. But we can make guesses with those grainy frames. In the end, nothing can really be positively confirmed. It is awkward to watch. According to CNA, the charge sheets reported that the weapon used was a foldable karambit knife. The weapon, however, did not belong to Natalie, but it did belong to Tan Sen Yang, the leader of the group. This is contrary to speculations that Natalie had drawn the knife from her bag. However, it wasn't long before this incident that Tan had actually slashed at the security guard and at the other person. So I can't imagine why he would just put the knife into Natalie's bag. Perhaps he wanted to give it to her just to hide it, or she took it from him. I don't know. I do have speculations about that. Since the knife then belonged to Tan Sen Yang, one netizen suspected that maybe he was the one who delivered the fatal slash. If you look at the video footage, you'll see a man wearing a black cap and a black long-sleeve t-shirt running towards Satheesh. However, it still remains unclear if the man is actually Tan Sen Yang, and because of the pillar being in the way in the video, it is impossible to say who exactly slashed at Satheesh, or if it was really at that time and not earlier that he was slashed. So this is a large group. They're a group of young people. What triggers groups like this to take a little confrontation to explosive attacks and eventual murder? We know that there's alcohol involved, adrenaline, probably feelings of power, anger, surprise. People don't quite behave the way they normally would when they are influenced by a mob or a herd. And this is what we call mob or herd mentality. Mob mentality, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a large and disorderly crowd of people, especially one bent on riotous and destructive action. And social psychology does give a variety of causes to why people feel so overpowered and influenced by mob mentality. This isn't just the first case I've done where a group have been part of an attack, and I think it is really important to know and understand what happens when somebody is influenced in this certain way. Unfortunately, in the world we're living at the moment, I do see on the news hundreds, thousands of attacks that happen from a group of people, especially young groups of people, quite often teenagers. So what triggers this? What causes this to happen? Quite often when somebody who's been involved in an attack that has been spurred by mob mentality, when the person has been interviewed afterwards, they do confess that they really didn't plan on getting involved in that type of attack, and that in the moment they almost felt deranged and delirious and kind of just like an out-of-body experience. They weren't really feeling themselves, and they literally just followed the crowd and went along with what was going on. Psychology does state that when people are a part of a group, they do experience a loss of self-awareness, also identity. When people are a part of a group, they can lose their sense of individual identity, especially depending on who the alpha is in the group and what type of actions they are portraying. Emotions, of course, being a part of a group can lead to heightened emotional states, be that excitement, anger, hostility, acceptability as well. Behaviors that are usually seen as unacceptable become acceptable when others in a group are seen carrying them out. Sometimes that one person in the group really wants to show off and please their friends and feel as though they're winning over their attention, and that they're, of course, people pleasers, and they want so desperately to be known as one of the cooler people in the group. Sometimes people feel anonymous within a large group, which reduces their sense of responsibility and accountability for when something as drastic as an attack or murder takes place. Also, diffusion of responsibility. Being a part of a group creates the perception that violent or unacceptable behavior is not a personal responsibility, but actually a group one. The larger the group or crowd, the more likely there will be a de-individuation. I feel like I have to say that one again. De-individuation and diffusion of responsibility. Also encouragement. If there is that alpha or charismatic leader, as I discussed, can exasperate already heightened emotions for a cause, especially if it is a group that believes itself to have been forgotten by society. However, mob mentality can still occur if the group thinks it has nothing else to lose, whether or not the leader is famous or whatever. Also, I do feel like from watching the video, Natalie kind of wanted to get more involved. She, maybe being the only female, wanted to prove something to the lads, but she was ready to fight. Like, she was really, really triggered. And she was also seeing all red and just kind of went all guns blazing on it. Like, she had no fear. You could see that she was ready to fight. We can clearly see most of these factors within the group led by Tan that morning. And I believe Satheesh may not have been killed if it was just an individual that he confronted. However, we will never know that. But also, the majority of this group were not personally affected by Satheesh, especially Natalie. The beef was really just between him and Tan, especially as Tan was the one that he was confronting because he had witnessed him slash at the security guard. Plus, the group were, as discussed, probably under the influence of alcohol on top of all of this. So things just got super chaotic and messy, and Satheesh was really, unfortunately, in the wrong place at the wrong time when he decided to handle this confrontation. Satheesh had clearly suffered a serious wound to his neck and bled profusely from it, eventually leading to his death. And now, guys, we are going to go into a little bit more detail. So just a warning, it can be triggering to understand what actually happens to a person when they do get their throat slit or their neck stabbed. So skip over the next minute or so if you do not want to listen to this. But after a person gets his or her throat slit, there are a number of things that could happen depending on where they were attacked. Essentially, the slit can sever any of these three things. Your trachea, which allows the passing of air to and through your lungs, the carotid arteries, which supply blood to the brain, and the jugular veins, which allow blood to flow from the brain. This information can be found on medical pages like WebMD, which is where I found it. But yeah, if the bleeding is not stopped, the person will fall into unconsciousness, usually under a minute, and eventually die, especially if your artery is severed, because obviously the blood is spurting out like projectile. And if your trachea has been slit, obviously air is not able to pass to and through your lungs and your throat because there is blood pouring into it. Obviously, as we know, it is an awful way to die. Based on the timestamp on the CCTV, a black-sleeved man rushed back into the mall, supposedly with the weapon. His exact position at this point is at the mall sliding door entrance. Based on the running speed of the attacker, the estimated timestamp of the throat slash is between 6:12:39 seconds to 6:12:41 seconds. The victim collapsed onto the floor and fully landed at 6:13 a.m., not even a minute later. From the way Satheesh collapsed, he was still standing straight after he had been slashed, and he slowly walked towards the group. Then he stood still for a moment and tragically collapsed face down on the floor. It is said, as the throat slash was so deep and likely hit his artery, it took about 25 to 27 seconds for his blood pressure in his body to fall rapidly, to such an extent that he went into immediate shock and into that semi-conscious state, which explains him walking really slowly and then collapsing. He was in complete shock. The science behind it is incredibly gruesome indeed, and Satheesh did lose a lot of blood, which disposes us to suppose that his neck wound was the fatal cause of death. However, there is actually a very slight chance that he could have suffered other injuries prior to the neck wound that contributed to his death. So speculating the precise cause of death was what most people did at the time. We are fast forwarding now to October 2021. Tan Sen Yang is now the only one out of all 7 people who were left to be charged over the brawl. He still faced a capital murder charge after allegedly stabbing Satheesh around his jaw and his neck at the entrance to the Orchard Towers in the early hours of July 2nd, 2019. The 5 others were jailed, and Natalie received a conditional warning after her murder charges were reduced for her. She served 200 days in prison. The case drew heated online discussion. leading to the Attorney General's chamber to direct the police to investigate claims of the preferential treatment in sentencing based on the offender's race. 2 of Tan's fresh charges were related to the brawl. He is now further accused of voluntarily causing grievous hurt to club patron Mohammed Faris Muhammad Ali at the entrance of the Naughty Girls nightclub in Orchard Towers. Tan is said to have slashed his face with a dangerous weapon, the foldable karambit knife, which had a small curve resembling a claw that morning. Tan was also charged with waving the karambit around at the entrance to the club and then cutting the right index finger of the security guard. When Tan's accomplices' cases were heard in court, prosecutors have said that his group had been embroiled in a dispute with another group at the nightclub entrance. So, there were other 8 new charges involved against Tan, incidents that were said to have happened from 2015 all the way up until the day before the brawl. So yeah, this is not the first time that Tan has been a little bit naughty. Wait till you hear this list. He has been up to no good for years. So the prosecution is accusing him of using a knife to stab a man in the chest at a Housing Boyd deck in Compassvale Walk on August the 23rd, 2016. The severity of the injuries were not mentioned. In another incident at Orchard Towers, Tan is said to have used a cleaver to attack 2 men outside the mall at 7:30 a.m. on March the 22nd, 2017. The charges suggest he was violent even when he was unarmed. On 2nd of November 2015, he allegedly punched a man at the Comfort Delgro Driving Centre in Ubai Avenue 4. He also punched a woman in the face at St. James's Power Station in Sentosa Gateway on the 23rd of February 2017, the court documents show. On the 2nd of June 2019, Tan sent a woman a text message threatening to injure a man who she knew, and the day before the Orchard Towers murder, Tan is said to have been involved in an altercation with a public servant. He was in Nassam Road at around 4 a.m. on the 1st of July 2019 when he allegedly punched a parking enforcement officer and kicked the man's motorcycle, causing more than $380 in damages. Tan and several others confronted Satheesh the next day. He and 6 other people, aged between 22 and 27 at the time, were charged with murder on 4th of July 2019. Fucking hell. People like this make me explosively ill. How is he continuing to get away with all this shit? He should have been locked up the first time he attacked somebody. So back to 2021, Tan was still being held on remand and would return to court on the 22nd of October. If convicted of voluntarily causing grievous hurt with a dangerous weapon, he could be jailed for life or imprisoned for up to 15 years and caned. He faces the death penalty if he's convicted of murder. So court proceedings also revealed that one of the members, Ang Da-yuan, was previously jailed for 3 weeks each in 2017 and 2018 for voluntarily causing hurt. He was also put on probation in 2010 for behaving in a disorderly manner in public. Another member, Tan Hongsheng, was also revealed to have 2 previous convictions for violent offences and possessions of weapons, and had undergone both a jail term at the juvenile home and reformative training in 2011 and 2016 respectively. First-hand investigations also revealed that Tan Sen-yang was also suspected to be involved in several past violent offences. After they were charged with murder, the male members were remanded at Changi Medical Complex for psychiatric assessment, while Natalie, the sole female suspect, was remanded at Changi Women's Prison for 3 weeks for psychiatric assessment. No bail was offered for all 7 of them at the time. So clearly they're a pretty violent group altogether, and they all seem to have a history in some sort of violence. A week after their arrests, 3 of the 7 members, Lu Bunchong, Chan Jiaxing, and Tan Hongsheng, had their murder charges reduced, as they, together with the other members, were aware of Tan being armed with the murder weapon during their meeting before the incident at Orchard Towers. The 3 men faced fresh charges on consorting with a person carrying an offensive weapon in a public place. They were all released on bail, which cost them between 15,000 and 20,000 Singapore dollars. After the reduction of her original murder charge, Natalie was offered bail of $15,000, and hence she was released after spending 3.5 months in remand for the murder. And eventually, in February 2020, both Joel Tan and Ang Da-yuan had their murder charges lowered to assault and were each offered bail for $15,000. The reduction of the murder charges against the first 6 suspects left the 7th and final suspect, Tan Sen-yang, as the only person left facing the murder charge. In October 2020, Tan Sen-yang's case had been moved to the High Court, where people stand trial for capital cases like murder within Singapore's jurisdiction. A date was scheduled for 3 of the members, Lu Boon-chong, Chan Jie-shing and Tan Hongsheng, to return to court. Going backwards, on the 29th of August 2019, only Lu and Chan turned up in court, while Tan was discovered to be missing. Of course he was. Tan's mother actually called the police, and a warrant of arrest was issued for Tan's whereabouts. Tan remained on the run for a month before he was rearrested and found on the 27th of September 2019. Not only that, Tan was also then charged with committing another crime of rioting while out on bail in August 2019. He had teamed up with 3 other men at the Central Mall to attack a 30-year-old victim, Desmond Neo Xiao Fu, who was also charged with rioting like his attackers. I just have no words. This guy. Get him, fucking lock him up. What the hell? Oh my God. On the 1st of October 2021, Tan was hauled back to court to face 10 fresh charges of causing hurt in unrelated incidents. It was revealed that Tan was involved in several violent incidents, and 2 of them, including the amputation of a woman's finger and permanent disfigurement of a man, occurred merely minutes prior to him fighting and killing Satheesh. After this, Tan spent another 2 years in remand before his trial occurred. Before Tan Sang-yang stood trial for murder in 2023 now, his 6 accomplices were being taken to court between March 2020 and March 2021 for the lesser charges they faced in relation to the Orchard Towers incident. And actually, on the 2nd of November 2020, it was reported that the police were investigating 2 women, both aged 28 and 36 respectively, for contempt of court over the women's social media posts, which contained allegations of preferential treatment in sentencing on account of race of alleged criminals, saying that minority people are given harsher sentences. And these allegations were linked to the Orchard Towers murder after the news reported the release of Chan Jie-shing. In response to such allegations, the Attorney General Chambers said such media posts have the potential to disrupt racial harmony in Singapore and cause irreversible divisions in our communities. And earlier that year as well, in October 2020, while Lu Boon-chong, Tan Sang-yang and Tan Hongsheng were still pending trial, a man named Subhas Nair, a Singaporean rapper actually, a musician, made claims on social media that racism and Chinese privilege played a part in allowing one of the members, Chan Jie-shing, to be given a conditional warning for the charge of consorting an armed man and escaped punishment for murder. In relation to Chan's case and other unrelated cases, Nair, whose full name goes by Subhash Govin Prabhakar Nair, really sorry if I pronounced that wrong, was charged with promoting ill will among the different racial and religious groups of Singapore through his comments online. After he stood trial in March 2023, the 31-year-old was found guilty of all 4 charges by the district judge on the 18th of July 2023. And more than a month later, he was sentenced to 6 weeks of imprisonment on the 5th of September 2023. He is currently appealing against his conviction and sentence. So guys, you know this. We have to be very, very careful and very, very mindful in Singapore with what we share on social media regarding anything political. Whenever I do a Singaporean case, I really always make sure to stick only to sharing the facts and information that is already out there online and legal. Not to give any personal opinions, as much as I would love to sometimes, guys, it is far too risky. So now, fast forwarding to literally only over a month ago, 3rd of October 2023, more than 4 years after the Orchard Towers incident, 32-year-old Tan Sang-yang officially stood trial for 1 count of murdering Satheesh. Tan was represented by a council of 3 lawyers, Teo Choo Ki, Subir Singh Gurao, and Nicole Yeo. Justice of the High Court presided the hearing while the prosecution was led by Deputy Public Prosecutor Hei Hung Chun, Lim Shin Hua, and Benedict Yeo of the Attorneys General Chambers. The trial itself is expected to last for around 2 weeks and 47 witnesses, including Tan's 6 accomplices, who were all dealt with earlier on. They will appear to testify in court. If found guilty of murder under Section 300 of the Penal Code, Tan will either be sentenced to death or life in prison with caning. The prosecution's case was that after Tan attacked 2 people with the karambit knife, Satheesh confronted the accused, resulting in Tan using the same weapon to attack Satheesh. And based on the prosecutor's arguments, Tan had committed murder by intentionally inflicting the stab wound on Satheesh's neck, such that one of the injuries was sufficient to cause death. in the ordinary course of nature, which was supported by the autopsy report of Satheesh's case. It was further revealed during the first day of Tan's trial that Tan Sin Yang had alcohol use disorder and a history of adjustment disorder and depressed mood. According to a psychiatric report tendered during his psychiatric remand, Tan was deemed mentally fit to plead and stand trial as these conditions did not have any contributory link to his alleged offences. And he also did not have an unsound mind at the time of the killing. It was reported that despite extensive investigations, the murder weapon was actually never found. Tan's trial is still ongoing as of now, today in 2023. He is currently heard before Justice Ayed Abdullah in the High Courts of Singapore. There we have it, guys. That was our case today. So still unknown for what will happen to Tan. And thoughts and prayers go out to all of those who lost their lives in this triple tragedy that we have discussed today. So yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around today and listening to this one. Again, all ears, I'm open to more suggestions of what you like to hear. I am now back each week, so there will be no more break, and I'm ready. Let's get the ball rolling. Let's get some more cases going. So now we're coming up to Christmas. I'm not slowing down, guys. Let's go full speed ahead. I'm excited to share with you the new cases that I am recording soon and I'm currently writing up scripts for. So yeah, have a fabulous rest of your weekend. When this is released, it will be, where will it be? I would have just celebrated Thanksgiving in Hong Kong. I, as you know, I'm not American, but I have a lot of American friends and I am not going to say no to, yummy turkey at a Friendsgiving. I love it. We're getting in the Christmas spirit. So thank you guys again, and I will see you next week.